Hello my friends, today we're going to talk about how to get back into powerlifting after the gyms reopen. I know the gyms are starting to reopen now in a lot of areas. I'm here in Arkansas right now and the gyms open on Monday. So on that note, I decided this is the perfect time to start talking about how we should ease back into powerlifting. It's been, for most of us, at least 4 weeks. For me, it's been 6-7 weeks since I've been out of the gym, or since our gyms have shut down. So that being said, let's jump into how we can expect to get back into powerlifting after all of this is over. Something that I did want to mention is that many coaches are telling their clients or telling other people, don't stress, you're not going to lose really any strength after all of this is over. And I think while the intentions are coming from a good place, it's important to understand that that's not the full truth. There is going to be some strength loss at minimum, and depending on what you've been doing during this quarantine, there may be some muscle loss. So let's jump into the details of that. Now, while there aren't many studies out there that revolve around strength or powerlifting as a sport, there are a few studies that we can look at, and for the most part, it seems that if you go about 4 weeks without training, you won't lose as much muscle. That being said, muscle and strength, while they do tend to go hand in hand, they aren't necessarily the same thing. As most of us know, training for strength and training for muscle tend to involve different training concepts. While you can gain muscle while you're training for strength, you won't necessarily gain strength when you train for muscle or hypertrophy. So they are two different styles of training, and that's important to keep in mind here. So the truth of this all is that it takes about 3 weeks to start losing strength. That being said, we've been in quarantine for longer than 3 weeks. So if you don't have equipment, if you don't have a barbell, if you don't have weights, it is very likely that yes, you have lost strength, especially if you haven't been maintaining the volume that you were maintaining before quarantine. For the majority of us though, the issue isn't that we've lost muscle, the issue is that we have become detrained. So for powerlifters, we can define detrained as someone who has experienced a decrease in training volume and intensity due to a period of inactivity. So this will result in a loss of strength, possibly the loss of muscle if we've been detrained for long enough, depending on how long this period lasts. And then it may also include weight gain or fat gain. So those are the things that we're going to be concerned about and pay attention to when we're looking into what we're gonna do to get back into powerlifting as soon as this is over. So here are some things that we need to consider when it comes to programming. I know many of us want to jump into the same percentages that we were working with before quarantine was over, but I also know that most of you understand that that is not a good idea for many reasons. When we consider general training concepts, we understand that there's only a certain level of training volume that we can hit before we reach overtraining. So this is the reason why we can no longer hit the same training volume or percentages that we were before if we are truly detrained during this period of time, which the majority of us will be at least a little bit detrained if we haven't been maintaining that same training volume. Being detrained means that our MRV isn't going to be the same as it was. MRV meaning maximal recoverable volume. So let's say if your MRV was a bit higher before all of this happened, it's not going to be as high as it was because this is part of detraining. It's going to lower a bit just because your volume has lowered and so has your intensity. So to recap everything that we've talked about, we haven't lost too much muscle, if any. We have lost some strength. We can no longer hit the same training volume that we were previously due to issues with injuries, with recovery, and our goal is ultimately to get our strength back up for powerlifting as quickly and effectively as possible. So I've heard a lot of coaches give different opinions on this, and it really depends from person to person, so keep that in mind. Everything that I say, take with a grain of salt. It's going to be different from person to person. That being said, due to the information that we know and have about our bodies and our central nervous system, in my opinion, going right back into training and lifting 85% plus, 80 to 85% plus is going to be ineffective. Our central nervous system plays a huge role in our recovery and how we perform in powerlifting or any strength or power sports. even though powerlifting isn't really a power sport, in my opinion. Our central nervous system essentially determines how efficiently and how quickly we are going to pick up the weight that we have in our hands or on our back. So this means that even if, yes, we are strong enough to technically pick up the weight, this doesn't necessarily mean that our central nervous system is prepared to pick up this weight. So while our muscles have the capacity to move this, it doesn't necessarily mean our body physically is ready to handle that weight yet, or can effectively handle that weight yet. So this is what we see when people overtrain. They'll handle too much volume too quickly, and then they're gonna get injured because their central nervous systems, their bodies aren't prepared to handle that much weight that quickly. And that is why overtraining is a huge concept that is talked about in powerlifting and something that we need to pay attention to when we do go back to the gym. So what will happen if we do start picking up 85% plus immediately when we go back to the gym? At minimum, we're going to fail lifts, but it's very likely that yes, you are going to get injured and you are going to be set back for way longer than a quarantine. So that's something we obviously do want to avoid. So what's the game plan? In my opinion, the best way to get back into powerlifting after all of this is to start within a moderate to heavy hypertrophy phase. And this really isn't because we've lost muscle. As we've already mentioned, you probably haven't lost too much muscle, but the biggest reason is to get your central nervous system, your CNS, prepared for the heavy weight again. Our bodies need time to adapt to the stimulus that we provide it. So if we provide too much too quickly, injured. But if we provide this stimulus more slowly in progressions, which is why we have training programs in the first place, then yes, we give our bodies time to adapt to the stimulus, progress, plateau possibly, and then continue progressing. So that's how our bodies generally adapt to things. This is how we know our bodies to adapt. Just think of this as your period to allow your central nervous system to relearn this weight, because essentially that is what we're doing. We're relearning the weight, and muscle memory is a thing. We're really going to progress more quickly than obviously if you were starting over, because you're not starting over. You just need to give your body time to readapt to the stimulus. So how heavy should you be lifting when you go back to the gym? Well, 85% plus, like I said, in my opinion, isn't a good idea, but I do think that working within 70 to 80% is realistic for most of us. And the best way that I recommend gauging how you're adapting to the strength is just like when we teach RPEs to new powerlifters, use those percentages and then gauge the RPEs of those. If the 75% feels like RPE 10, well, obviously we know, okay, our bodies are still adapting. But once the 75% starts to feel more like 75%, that's obviously a very good cue that, okay, our bodies are starting to adapt. It's time to continue progressing. Our bodies are starting to relearn this weight. It's time to move forward in the programming, get more closer into the strength or max strength phases that you were in. It really depends on where you were in your programming as well. So once you have adapted to that weight again, I would recommend just going back into your progressions that you were in already. That doesn't mean that you should go back to lifting 100% from 75%. So what this does mean is that if you were on a program that was, let's say, based on linear progression, then going back to linear progression, if that's what your body is familiar with, is probably going to be your best bet. But let's say that you just started a new program, because I've been hearing that a lot. I started a new program and now this all messed it up. Well, I did want to mention for those of you who were starting a new program, it's probably best, let's say if you were on a program that was DUP, daily undulating periodization. So this is where the weights fluctuate from day to day. So let's say you lifted 75% this day and then 90% this day or something like that. I wouldn't recommend doing a different sort of periodization or different sort of program that your body's not familiar with, because it's going to take more time to adapt to that. So I would initially start with a sort of periodization or a program that your body's already familiar with to readapt, probably for 2 to 3 months. But to be honest, this is really going to depend from person to person. And if you're with a coach, your coach is going to know best, but this is for those of you who don't have a coach and don't really have any sort of blueprint to follow. And for those of you who have been a bit depressed and maybe haven't been training at all because you just feel like it's kind of useless at this point, that's okay. There are some things that you can do until your gyms reopen, and honestly, the biggest thing that I'm going to recommend, and it's very basic and it's probably what you already know but just don't feel motivated to do, but it's to start giving stimulus to those muscles again, which means you can be using body weight, which is what I'm using. I'm using body weight and TRX right now. Most of my clients, I made them get equipment, but I'm traveling right now. I left New York and all I have is a TRX, which is still amazing. So if you can get your hands on a TRX, I would absolutely recommend it because they're great for in the gym and outside of the gym. They're great all around. So it's not a waste of money if you purchase a TRX. Now that being said, providing stimulus to your muscles is going to be the biggest thing, because that means we're slowly starting to add training volume, so you won't have to jump back into baby weights or super lightweight when you get back into there, because your central nervous system is still used to some volume, still used to some stimulus. You're gonna wanna do more reps, more sets, more total weekly volume, just to make sure the volume stays relatively high. The other thing that you can do is work on mobility. That's a huge thing that I've personally been working on, but most powerlifters have something that they can work on, something that they can improve. If you are an absolutely perfect powerlifter with perfect technique, perfect form, you can't make any adjustments to be a better lifter, well then you probably don't exist, because most of us do have things that we can work on, technique that we can improve. There's not really any perfect powerlifter out there because we're always striving to do something better. Now, the other thing is a given, and I think most people have been focusing on this, but if you haven't, you do want to keep protein relatively high. I'm mostly vegetarian. I don't really eat meat too often, so my protein levels generally aren't as high as the average meat eater or average person. And so obviously we want to make sure we're preserving what we can. And then the other things are, you want to keep your general activity levels high. So this could just be walking. I'm doing 10,000 steps every day. So keeping your activity levels high will help with that detraining aspect, specifically the fat loss aspect. So, or not the fat loss, sorry, the fat gain aspect. So you do want to be sure that you're not completely detraining, you're not losing all this muscle, losing all this strength, and also gaining fat. So those are some of the things that you can do, and those are honestly, even though it doesn't sound like it's a lot, it really is something that's going to play a big role in how quickly you get back to your strength. So that all being said, this is a rough time for all of us. I know that if you are a powerlifter, this is probably very frustrating, or especially for those of you who are really wanting to get into powerlifting, or maybe just started a brand new program, just started getting into strength, and you felt really good and now you're a little unmotivated because you feel like you're at a standstill. We're kind of all in that same boat. So don't be discouraged, but also don't just go into the gym and lift like a maniac because you're going to injure yourself. Take things slowly. For the next 4 to 6 weeks, lift in a hypertrophy phase, 70 to 80% of your 1RMs, and gauge those RPEs, monitor how your body adapts to the training, and then ease back into your normal progressions, whether it's DUP, whether it's LP, linear progressions, and you should be back to normal probably within the next 2 months. And to be quite honest with you, that's not a long time if you are in powerlifting for the long haul. 2 months is nothing. I hope this little blueprint and explanation was helpful for you guys to understand where you are now and what it's going to take to get to where you were, and that's really my advice there. If you guys didn't know, I am a powerlifting and strength coach. I also do personal training and lifestyle coaching. So if you guys are interested in working with a coach or working with a trainer, all of my information is provided down below. But if you guys also want to check out my website, it's flexclub.fit. It is a powerlifting blog, and you can also sign up for my coaching there as well. So do check those things out if you guys are interested. I will catch you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to leave a thumbs up because it does help me out a lot. So catch you guys in the next one.